The Sudanese army is facing increasing opposition following a coup on Monday. State officials in Khartoum are vowing disobedience. In a statement posted on social media, ministries and agencies said that they would not step aside or hand over their duties. They declared a general strike, but pledged to continue to supply flour, cooking gas, and emergency medical care. The main market, banks, and fuel filling stations in Khartoum were still closed on Thursday. Smaller shops were open, but there were long queues for bread. Activists in the country have been mobilizing for mass demonstrations this week. Many protesters are opposed to return to military rule and are demanding that a transition towards civilian rule be put back on track. Well, we're staying with that story and are now joined from London by Edward Thomas, a historian specializing on Sudan. Edward, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Live. Do you think the military government is likely to engage in talks with the ousted civilian leadership?
Well, thanks for inviting me. Well, as you just mentioned, there's been some statements certainly circulating on social media attributed to the civilian elements of the government, which was deposed in the coup a couple of days ago, calling for a return to constitutionality, to a constitutional system, and for the government to end, to release people that it's arrested, and for people to engage in civil disobedience. The civilian, this thing that's circulating, I'm not sure if it's true, but we don't know what's exactly is going on in Sudan at the moment because so many websites are down. But what people are saying is that they want the military to reverse their decisions. They don't seem to be holding out. They don't seem to be rejecting altogether the possibility of working with the military in the future, but they want reversal of these coup decisions and these unconstitutional decisions as a prior step.
So, Edward, from what we're seeing, Sudan is facing increasing international isolation, including financial cuts, which are likely to further worsen the economic crisis in that country. How prepared is the military leadership in dealing with such financial cuts, and how do you foresee them perhaps securing funds?
Well, that's a difficult thing to understand. Sudan has been going through an incredibly tough set of economic reforms. One might call them reckless economic reforms, following the guidance of the international financial institutions who were trying to deal with a very serious economic crisis and prescribed extremely severe, recklessly severe measures that have led the inflation rate in Sudan to reach over 400% annualized in July this year. I don't know what the subsequent figures were, but the inflation is incredibly high, higher than Yemen, higher than Lebanon. It's a very, very difficult situation to be hungry in, and the vast majority of Sudanese people are very, very hungry at the moment. The reason for this is the government is not able. First of all, the government has reduced subsidies on food without getting the people ready for them, without giving people adequate alternative ways of sourcing food that they can afford. And they've reduced subsidies on food in order to stabilize the currency and stabilize the monetary system. In order to do that, they need to have constant access to foreign exchange. And the reforms, painful and perhaps reckless as they were, did offer the possibility of access to foreign exchange from international financial institutions. Now, I understand that immediately in the days before the coup, the President Burhan met with an American envoy and other envoys. They reportedly told him that, this assistance would be cut off if the transition to civilian rule did not go ahead. And he seems to have ignored that threat. Why did he do that? Well, there's a couple of possible reasons. One is he may have secured some kind of funding from foreign allies that would allow him to take this forward. The obvious candidates are Saudi Arabia, UAE, the Emirates, maybe Israel, although Israel doesn't necessarily offer a lot of money to its allies. All of these people would like to see, are more inclined, more supportive of military rule than of democratic rule in Sudan. However, it's hard to see the Saudis coming up with very much money. I mean, if you look at what the Saudis give to the Yemenis, a country which they've really pulverized over the past few years, they give maybe enough to cover wheat imports for a year or so. It's not a lot of money. It's not. It won't compensate for the loss of international resources from the international community. The other thing is perhaps the military have some reserves of their own, which they will commit to stabilizing prices. That's a story that's going around. Again, I'm speaking to you from London. I'm cut off from events in Sudan, but certainly there are stories coming that prices are a bit more stable in Sudan. That might mean that the military have more control over the markets in basic commodities than was previously thought. So they may have some reserves which they're prepared to spend to give them a honeymoon. But a honeymoon lasts a month. I don't think they would have much more resources to hand that they would be prepared to spend making their compatriots' life easier um, uh, after that month is over.
Edward, thank you so much for joining us in Africa Live and sharing your insights with us. Edward Thomas, an historian specializing on Sudan.